Keep in mind he's burned every single bridge since.
Oh yeah, burning bridges is a good thing to do. We are on.
All right.
Where are we going now?
Let's talk about island style.
Island style.
We rambled a bit about early stuff, and I guess like island
style, baby.
I mean, I guess I can start. I mean, when I guess a lot of island people, or me in particular, I mean, like I was like running stuff at that point. Like I had this image of drifting as from what we saw from Japan, like the early drifting from Japan. Like the early 90s stuff with all our 90s cars is what we took as drifting in its purest form.
Yeah.
And we took that as it was, and we're like, that's what we tried to emulate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we tried to... And we tried to keep it fun at the same time. I mean, like, all of us were having so much fun. There wasn't a lot of competition, because it was more fun for us to drive with our friends and to be like, get really better and get really close to each other and be like, yeah, this is dope, than it was to be like, I want to compete and win. Like, that was never a huge thing. Even when the competitions got, like, super heaty, like, there was always a back and forth between, like, Cody Ross and Matt Tregear, and I don't ever remember them... Cody. Yes. I don't ever remember them being like, I'm going to get you, or, like, any of that. They were, like, hugging each other. Like, it was always fun. Like, there was no big stakes. I mean, like, if you won, you got, like, an extra $100. It wasn't like... I mean, we're not giving away, like, thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
But
we also don't make any money, so
it was like island style grew into this thing of we didn't care what our cars looked like. We cared more about drifting and drifting all the time as much as we could and having fun with our friends.
And to date this is before missile became a term used.
Oh yeah, that wasn't
a word. It's just a car you keep driving, and that was
it was like driving as much as you can. So it's like all the dents and stuff became more like battle scars of like, oh wow, like you drifted like so much, or you started hitting your buddies, that you had these things. It was not like, oh cool, your car smashed up. It's like, oh cool, like my friend did that to my car, like I got away from that, it was sick. I mean, I think it was like 2012 was around when Husky Situations started like being a thing, and then they were the first group of drivers that really tried tandeming as close as they could. And then I always remember like their early trains of like 3 to like 6 cars, and then how they learned. And I would not recommend doing this just at all.
Ping-ponging off each other.
It was a bumper cars, right? And then, but the thing is, it's like it worked itself out, because like if you kind of got out of line, you would get bumped by your friend, and then you kind of just, it all forced itself back in. So all the cars all started getting beat up. But when you watch the train of 5 cars going around with each other, even if they're bumping each other a bit, it was dope. And then they got to the point where they got so good that they could do the entire thing.
But they're not hitting each other.
They're not hitting each other anymore.
They paid the toll for the couple of years.
Right? So
their
like
cars got a little beat up.
A lot of people saw that as an example. Like,
let's take a step here.
We're going too fast.
So what is more important here is the fact that Husky Situations are a group of like 5 or I think there's 8 of them.
There's 8 at their most, I think.
When people think of drifting, they think, oh yeah, I want to go door to door with someone else.
Yeah.
It's not their buddy. It's someone else. It's not a friend. They might be friends later. But Huskies, they all had a similar mentality. These guys are all from different walks of life. And you meet them, and there's just like a motley crew of guys.
Yeah.
They had it from the beginning of, I want to go door to door. And they were like slow to learn stuff, so they got the basics, and then they just started driving together. And what built Husky was like a burst mentality of like Team Burst, is that they just drive together all the time, and that's what their main goal is. That's their image that they want to create as a whole, which is much different than a lot of other teams. So like there's Japanese teams that will they want to drive together, but they're not about door to door, it's about flow. So every team's different. This is just what Huskies is. And then that door-to-door started to rub off on some other guys, and some other teams started to do more door-to-door stuff. Every team's a little bit different. Huskies, that was their thing. They just bounced into each other, and then they would just correct themselves, because they're always door-to-door. Their cars are garbage cans, like, after every
Their early cars were literally... I remember having to tell Danny at the end of one season that he couldn't... I'm like, I cannot, like, your windshield smashed, like, the entire car.
There's not a panel that didn't have.
There wasn't, and he still has a fender of that car. like on the wall, like that. Like there's still pictures around of it with a huge like target on the side. That was probably driving Alberta guys crazy. Like, oh, this car's a pile of garbage.
The last time I saw that coupe was just like, yeah, that thing was pretty not straight. Like the rockers were pounded in. It's not like the doors and the fenders were pounded, but like the rockers were caved in. Like that car was so.
It like they would bang stuff out, but then. I mean, they kept their cars driving, and a lot of that is still that to this day. Where like some people, they'll get to the point where they're getting pretty good, and they'll try and make their cars look nice. Like the Huskies do that.
Yeah.
Where they're at the point now where they're good enough, but they'll put like Danny has like fiberglass panels, like skins. Yeah, they got skins over their panels. Yeah. So like when they get hit, the fiberglass bounces back out, but underneath it is still a garbage can. Like if you look up close, like. They're still bumping into each other. It's still the epitome of island style where they're out there having fun. Yeah. They don't care what their cars look like. They're just trying to drive as much as possible. Yeah. And that carries on to this day. I mean, like, we didn't mention one of the earlier teams that even predates Husky, which was like business casual at the time, was like some of our better drivers that became really good friends and roommates. And they didn't try to get... They tried to get close to each other, but they weren't like bumping off each other, and they were probably... It's sad because they were at a time period before super close tandem was like really cool, so they kind of missed maybe by like 6 to 8 months like their moment to shine as like a really good like holy shit look at these guys drifting super awesome. They kind of like petered off after that. But
no man, they had some... a good solid like 4 to 5 years, and they were door to door without making huge damage to their cars.
Yeah,
they're a lot more controlled. It was very exciting. It was very fast. It was very close. They would still bounce into each other, but it wasn't to the point of Huskies where there's just so many of them that just bounce into each other.
They just didn't get like a lot of exposure. Like everyone who was in the drift scene knew them.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't
the only time that Husky got exposure was when it was post. It was once all of the local island teams sort of started petering off. Huskies went to America, and so they did a year like what most. Well, we can touch on this later. Is when teams do a big, we're going to hit a bunch of events and get as much exposure.
And that was just when I'm pretty sure that was the first Nissan Fest that.
Yeah, so Nissan they won Nissan Fest.
And then they went to Villains.
Back to the Future, Villains.
Yeah, and
they won
DUI
every single event they went to that year, and it's like an unheard of Canadian team of we can touch on that later, but yeah, it's like basically island style is like very good driving, and they don't care about what their cars look like, and that's, I mean, I'm pretty sure I don't even pay attention that much a lot to like all the other drift scenes now. I mean, like this is my drift scene now, and now this takes up all my time. I can't really pay attention like what's the Japanese scene, but from what I see now, like they like having nice looking cars and flashy looking cars. That's kind of They still do a lot of like original Japanese track stuff. They still have like that style, but they still have their cars look good. And
that year they all painted to predate that year.
They cleaned up a lot. Yeah.
They all made it one color. At least the gray hides.
They tried to be a team.
Yeah, they did. They
didn't want to be all like garbage cans like they were before.
Yeah, well they made their cars good, and then they just kept driving it. They had the original Jackals with the banner at the door and stuff. And then after that year, like most teams, when they do that full year of competition and driving, they just are like burnt out. So
they were not burnt out from driving. I know a lot of them. They put a lot of financials on the line to do that year. Right?
Burnt out that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of them are recovered now financially, but there was like a good year after that where they're like, like I can't even afford to go to do this again.
It's not cheap.
But Island Style, a lot of people who lived here didn't have much of Japanese exposure. To me, it's the most purest form of driving, because it was just simply, hey, that looks kind of cool, let's go do that. And then maybe through the years they learned a bit more about the Japanese take on drifting and stuff like that, but for the most part there's no Japanese styling here for the time. It was mostly stock cars with some rims, like Rotas.
Mostly Rotas.
So it's just mostly...
It's whatever you
have cars.
Rotas on the front, teardrops on the back.
This is what happened. This is how the island separates itself from all the other places. Is that all the other places have their own idea of what makes a drift car, and that's a painted car, one color. They have flashy kits, flashy wheels. It's the whole package, and why.
Yeah, it's
this is what separates the island, because everyone else outside of the island was more focused on the style aspect of what your car looked like as opposed to how it performed. And here it's just literally just kids jumping in their cars, driving what they have, because they have no money, they're young, they're living with their parents, whatever. So that's why island style became what it is because the drivers here focused on driving and driving a lot.
And no one really put any emphasis. Like, there's some people who did go out of their way to make their cars look cool, and they're like, yeah, your car looks cool, but there was no shaming of, like, your car looks like a piece of shit or whatever. It was more like, you drifted cool, I don't care what your car looks like. And at the end of the day, that's what island style was drift and be as cool on the track as you can and have as much fun as you can. Mm-hmm. And other places, like, I mean, every little region, like the States, if you go back west, like even back east as far as like Quebec and Ontario is a little bit different than like Alberta. And then if you go to Japan now, it's a completely different scene than it was from what I remember from like the 90s, from what we took kind of inspiration from. So it's this, and luckily we're on an island, so like we're kind of segregated from a lot of the scenes to be able to be our own scene.
Well, it's not really true. I mean, Japan styling that people reference is 2001. That's where it comes from. The 90s Japanese cars were literally stock cars with maybe coilovers.
Yeah, like that's what that's what I remember drifting being, is just like, oh yeah, there's like a stock car and he's drifting, like, and that's
coilovers and
15s.
Small wheels, not 18s.
Working e-brakes in a Corolla for back in those days. And honestly, I really enjoyed watching those old ones.
Who uses e-brakes?
People who want car control.
But yeah, I guess like island style basically became what it was around that time, like 2012 ish, like that. It's that time between like 2010 to 2012 when basically is when island style started becoming its full thing. And then after 2012 to like 2014, when missile cars started being a thing, people started associating what we do with missile cars and started associating what we do with like destruction derbies. Like people would be like, I don't want to go to Western Speedway because my car will get all smashed.
Yeah, and then even in the UK, there's a purpose-built track, and they were actually like, they had to put out, I think there was an article on Speed Heroes, or Speed Hunters, sorry. There was like an article that they actually had to post on like very publicly and tell everybody like, you're not allowed at the track anymore unless your car is all one color, none of these stupid spray painted patterns. You have to have working lights, you have to have your turn signals in place, because they were at the verge of losing all insurance and all credibility in the scene, in the greater motorsport scene, because it was such a banger race kind of thing. Because these guys were just driving E36 BMWs and they would literally just show up and run into each other. And then they'd spray paint their cars with wavy, ugly graphics, and then come back the next time.
I haven't actually seen
that. Like it was full banger style, like not even trying to drive well.
Yeah, that sounds like you're just like drifting plus a demo derby.
And they had to like shut it down. Like, no, you can't do this anymore. You have to like have lights. You have to have most of your panels. Like, we're not going to be total dicks, but your car has to look like a car.
Presentable, and to be fair, that is a fully legitimate thing because
you
which
need
is what
to
I was
promote
talking about with the Huskies. Is that they drive together like that, and most people who are like, oh yeah, I got my crumpled beer can, you're like, you just aren't learning, and you're not learning from that. You're just like, oh yeah, this is cool, and then you just toss the chassis away after
there's some drivers that, I mean, they probably grew up and their drift scene was our island scene, and they probably started watching videos of Huskies, and their probably idea of this scene is these crunched up cars. And I see that now with some newer drivers where they're like, yeah, my car's all smashed up, and we're like, yeah, but like you didn't do anything cool while doing it. You kind of just smashed your car. I mean, like when you're drifting and you get battle scars from bumping your friends and you're drifting dope, it's one thing. When you're just like, I spun out and hit the wall and my car's all smashed, and you're like,
sick.
Okay.
I've been there, and someone's like, yeah, I got wall damage. It's just like, yeah, but that's the front of your car.
Yeah, like a wall tapped. I'm like, yeah, but like
the wrong end altogether, and you don't really want to hit the wall that hard. Come on. Yeah, and the whole like missile became a thing. If we want to explain that, like pro drivers, instead of smashing their expensive pro competition car, would get a random car that was written off or taken off the road, like Japanese drivers, because that's where it started, obviously. But they would just get a written off whatever car and drive it in incredible proximity to other people in missile cars in order to grow their skills quicker and cheaper than ruining your good car. And then you take your missile car, you go park it out back. It's not really for public exhibition. You jump in your nice car and you show off your new skills. No one's supposed to see you driving a missile car. That's like the scooter or the fat chick. Like, no one's supposed to see you with it. You got to get your skills and then you get a nice car. But no one has the money for that.
But the
and I understand
turn of events with that was that all of these pro drivers are like, I don't like driving this piece of shit. So then they throw a kid at it, another bigger car.
And then it just turns into a second car.
And the whole purpose of it was to drive a similar car to your own, but has more damage that you don't mind wrecking.
Yeah.
And I really have a huge... It's a back and forth because on one hand you have more driving, it's a seat time car versus looking good. But then you also look at it as there's so many people doing this that they just write chassis off. So these cars that are already in dwindling numbers are now going more and more. And that's the whole Ibisu thing where just people are just driving like garbage. They're just literally driving into things just because they can.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's stupid. Why are you doing it? It's a waste of your time, really. But everyone's like, oh, I got door to door, I crunched the wall or whatever. And it's not, you're not even focusing on good driving. You're just focusing on driving, getting close, and it's not a good close.
Yeah, that's a full entirely different thing. I mean, we see that. You probably see that in every drift scene, and I see it at our track here. You'll get people like they'll focus more on getting close than driving well, and you're like, well, if you do that, you'll have to learn the hard ways, like the Huskies did a long time ago. Where you're just gonna lose a shell.
And then as us, like Dynasty, we learned the hard way because we have cars you can't get anything for.
Yeah, I mean,
and
like,
we run into each other all the time. When I went to
Villains with Danny, and then he's like tandeming with Cody.
Yeah.
And then I remember, like, I don't know what happened. Basically, you hit him, and then we were both like, oh, fuck. Like, we smashed his taillight. Like, we both know that's a car from the 70s. Like, you can't even find that anymore. And Cody was like, no, man, it's fine. And we're both sitting there like, oh, my God. Like, you felt so bad.
We save getting sad for after. When we're on the track, I don't know if you know, in motorsports, there's, like, the red fog or the red mist, whatever. If you're, like, into, like, full Le Mans style guys, like you're just in the zone.
Oh, you're in the
zone.
zone.
The red mist is just like you're too focused. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
matter.
When we show up at the track and we just pretty much go. Like it doesn't matter. Like
I'm assuming
my
you guys
door's been
have
zip tied shut before.
You guys probably have let go of those shells a long time ago. At this point,
you'd
have to.
You have to. Yeah, like
you can't drive something that old and that cool and not be like, well, I'm drifting now. Like this is
Cody's car when he got it. The whole front end was shifted over like 4 inches. Matt's car is probably the nicest of the bunch when he got it. Mine was basically rusty and garbage, and within 2 years of starting to drift, I like backed it into the wall and caved it in. And it's long gone in my mind, but we try to fix them regularly and kind of make them look half decent. But yeah.
So that's the point of not giving up too.
Having a missile car would be a great advantage to us, but it's harder to find a 72 Corolla missile car than it is to fix my existing car.
It'd probably be way easier
so it's just like, just drive the one car and just spend all your minutes alive fixing it.
Until it's not a thing anymore, and then maybe you have to get a
new
newer
quarter
80s Corolla at that point.
80s so modern.
Fuel injection, oh.
Ours are all fuel injected. None of us are
Not back then.
But
there is something to be said for taking some pride in your car.
I like to keep it semi-clean.
And that seems to be, like, I keep tabs in a lot of the drift scenes in Canada, and I know that's an issue back east, like in Ontario. We say back east, they hate that. For us, it's back east, but them, it's like central. To them, east is like you're going to the east coast, right?
It's like the Midwest in Chicago. It's like, that is on the east half of this.
They're having issues because they technically don't have tech. And to this day, I'm still pretty sure they don't have tech. I know as of last year, I was like, why don't you guys just do tech? I mean, that's what we do. It takes a while, but I mean, I've failed more nice cars than I have failed shitty cars.
Yeah, Capti has a very thorough tech inspection.
And I've gone to tracks where the tech was, they look at your car and then they scratch their head and see, like, that seems legit.
It's a car.
Yeah, and they're like, I mean, I don't like to brag, but like, 3 of our tech guys are like Red Seal mechanics, so if anyone has an issue, I'm like, okay, well, like,
We'll tell you how to fix it.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, it's about keeping people safe.
We'll probably help you fix it.
I mean, like, we're trying to keep our scene legit, but a lot of people don't really appreciate that. I mean, when they come to our track, like, we have a I've gone through and go look at other people's techs, take what I like from it. Like, I handwritten the entire thing. People don't know. Like, I handwrite all our tech stuff. Everything at some point has had my hands in it, because way back when our tech sheet was like the same one you probably see from like other weird tracks, like, make your car, needs to be good.
Brake lights.
Like, now it's like I have a thorough one. I'll reference other people's rules if I have to. Like, if you need to do a roll bar for a Miata or whatever, your convertible, like, I go, like, you have to do the roll bar per, like, the SCCA, like, solar rule standards. Like, I don't have to make my own. Like, they did it. If you have to harness, go, like, do, like, these guys. They have, like, here's how to do it properly.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, when I took over, like, taking over is basically one guy was disposed of, and that's... probably a long story, and then the other person, Mike Slacko, who I was basically partners with, and we ran CapD for a year or two together, he basically moved away. And I mean, a lot of people, like, even to this day, probably still think, like, Serge makes thousands of dollars doing it, and I'm like, there must be, I mean, if there can't be any money involved if one guy says this is not worth my time and he quits and leaves, right? Like,
we make hundreds of dollars that goes back into the organization.
Yeah, I mean, everything we make goes back in. We've got 2 tire machines now. We've got like fire extinguishers.
Helping support the drivers. Like, you spent what profits you have go back into making people's lives easier at the track.
That's what we
do the best we can when other racing groups start to use our stuff and break things.
I've gone to CapD. I've had Suzanne run up and give me earplugs, which I've...
Yeah, those
and
are free.
bottles of water.
Yeah.
Like,
those are free.
You supply things.
I mean, like, people don't appreciate how much money goes into all, like, I mean, I didn't really until it's like you start doing it. You're like, how much is buying like a whole bunch of water for an event cost? That could be anywhere from like $50 to $100. Like, in the summer of like flats of water.
30-degree day.
Yeah. I buy sunscreen. I mean, when there's some events, I'll get like water guns.
Exactly. So it's not like it's just money that's disappearing. It's like, well, it pretty much all goes back into the organization.
I mean, there was a time where we didn't even have track insurance. Now the track itself was insuring us, but they would charge a premium for that.
Yeah.
So then we got to a point where we're like, oh, we'll get our own insurance, which was like a whole, that was probably 2011 when I did that, 2011, 2012, and it was like, yeah, I want to get like insurance for. They ask you what motorsport you have, right? A little checkbox when you apply for insurance, and you have to go other.
Is drifting in there.
Drifting. Then the insurance agent calls you, like, what the hell is drifting? Like, to this day, I think now it's probably a thing, but like,
but back
8 years ago, that was like,
what is this?
Yeah, what is drifting? You have to
explain. Like autocross, but more.
You're like,
swoopy.
It's circle track racing, but sideways, kind of like drag racing, sideways, really fast, and they're like, okay. I mean, I still think we pay a lot for our insurance. From what the track told me, they're like, you guys pay a lot, but our insurance company's really good. They're like, haven't really raised our rates that much, and they kind of like, this is what I do. This is a very event. I send him our rules. He tells us what we need to do, and then it's
keep the bean counters happy.
God forbid anything happens. I guess I'm covered. Maybe, probably not. From what I understand, you can still get sued. So
probably. At least we're not in the more litigious of countries in America.
There's a lot of like. I don't even know where we're going. Yeah, we started in that 2011. I like to mention, Chris isn't here, but the fortitude that guy has keeping his mouth shut. You guys didn't see that, but the cat he loves to death. I was watching her climb onto his back, claws deeply in his shoulder, and he just kept a straight face, maybe like eyes watered up, and he just like, can't break for the
I thought you were going to say the fortitude he has for keeping his mouth shut at the track when people do stupid things stupid things.
He does sometimes. Yeah. I mean, the early years now have all kind of like blended into each other.
I know, it's hard to think of like when did that happen? That was
and now it's almost like the second. Like, I keep pretending like I'm an old man. I'm like, what am I, 33 now? I'm like, I'm an old man. Like back in my day. But now it's the younger generation of kids coming in and driving, and then they're not driving old Corollas anymore or old 240s. You're seeing like BRZs and like 350Zs.
That's a topic that I have written down that we were gonna, not necessarily today, but that is like the next. What is the new drift car? The next drift car? Where the future?
Oh, I know the next drift cars are already going to be G35s, 350Zs. Probably not. 350Zs have a premium. They cost more than G35s because I guess they're like a 350Z.
They're sports car,
but they're usually
still getting
between
reasonable.
5 and 8 now.
But they're usually beat to shit way more than a G35. A G35 is usually like the old man's car.
Yeah.
That's so gross.
There's
Hyundai
four-door
Genesis. We're probably going to be the next big drift car.
The small Cadillacs have manuals. Is it like?
Are they rear-wheel drive?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's rear-wheel drive small V6 caddies.
I mean, what was it like?
People aren't creative enough to.
Last
think outside the
year
box.
was probably the first year I saw an airbag go off in a car, and I had to scratch my head. I'm like, is this gonna be a tech thing now? I don't like.
Yeah, it should
Like
be.
I
You
don't.
should have your airbag
This
fuses
wasn't.
out.
Yeah, but it was like a
Airbag
side
fuse
curtain
out.
one. It was a side curtain one. So then you're like, that's good.
Still though, I think your airbag fuses need to be out if you're at the track. I think it's an autocross thing. They make you do it.
Yeah, maybe I gotta look into that because that's never been an issue. Everything that that people drive.
Because you hit a good enough bump curb mid corner, you're gonna pop the yaw whatever stupid sensor in there. The inertia sensors are gonna go off. It wouldn't be really fun.
Chris can get us back on track. Where was I?
Yeah,
I don't know.
We just lost.
I don't know.
You
Yeah,
walked away and we
the
lost
early
it.
years when I took over, everything was like that. That's when island style was picking up. That's when drifting for us was like crazy fun.
Yeah.
Everything was new.
We should also know too that the track has walls everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is something that's only been brought to my attention recently is that like some people are afraid to come here, which is I got
it's
over
fair.
that fear a long time ago.
But I mean,
But most places people go are large parking lots or areas. I mean,
well, like if you go to like Shannonville, it's like a motorcycle racetrack, and it's out in the middle of grass. And my dad used to take me there when I was younger, when I was a kid, go watch motorcycle racing, and I went to go visit there like a couple years ago to watch drifting, and I remember seeing like. No one, like, people are afraid to try and drift corners because they're like, oh, and I want to go ask them, the drivers, like, why don't you just, just
Yeah, because
go in and huck? And they're like, oh, I'll get stuck in the grass, and then they come up to get me. It's kind of embarrassing. I'm like, grass is, like, your only reason for not...
That's safe. That's the safest
like,
part.
I got walls everywhere.
well, unless you dig in and then flip the car, but that's whole other...
I don't know.
Not
But
very
yeah, it's the mentality. I get it. Like, you never had to think about hitting a wall.
And that's that's the other thing, too, is that pretty much the only big crashes we've ever had are people who aren't even from here. Like, all the local guys will, like, maybe touch a wall or maybe... We haven't even had a major wall incident in quite some time. That was... The car still drove home. But the only... the really weird ones that happened, like we had an FC which had a full cage. And so it was two different
it's been a
FCs
couple.
with full cages. One hit a wall due to
R7s have a bad track record at the track.
Yeah. Well,
S14s and R7s.
Well, really, it comes to the drivers. S14s are just like regular good cars.
I mean, I've been doing this for so long that I've learned at this point that everybody has to learn the hard way. Whereas, like, all of us now have done this for so long that we can tell new drivers, like, don't do that. Like, learn from my mistakes. I'm trying to save you trouble. Don't do X, Y, Z. Like, it's going to happen to you. But every single one of them has this belief. Like, some of them will listen to you, but, like, very rarely will they do. But when they do, you're like, oh, sick, that guy's doing so good. He's listening to what I'm telling him. But, I mean, I don't know if that's, like, the old man thing. Like, listen to what I tell you, I know better.
Well, this is... I mean,
Taught you something.
Yeah.
being the fact that we've been around I've been driving for just over 12 years, thereabouts.
I mean, I remember watching Chris come here from Vancouver to drive. I'm like,
No, I was living here, just no one knew me. I was living up in...
I just assumed you were from Vancouver.
No, well, I'm from Vancouver. I know all the Vancouver guys.
Yeah, it's like JD is from the island.
Yeah, JD's fully an island guy. What?
That was the best.
But it's just that we've been driving for so long that all of the new guys, their learning has become exponential because we like this is why we focus on teaching because we all want to drive together. We want to have as few screw ups as possible, and the more people flow, the better everything is because the least amount of people that spin out, the more track time we have. So if we all get on a basic plane of completing corners and or going to the next corner so you're not spinning out all the time, that's why we focus on it. So when we were learning, it took a couple, like 2010 was a huge year for us, and I'll talk about the Deadbeat Summer next one. But between 2010 and 2012 is where we learned a great deal of things. So it went from small amount of tandems, which were a few cars apart, to door-to-door in a safe manner, where you know why you use a handbrake and why you use a clutch kick or why you use your front brakes or why you focus on your tire pressures or dampening or sway bars or basic how to set up a car. Just very basic. We're not race car drivers whatsoever. And then we have new kids that we just are like, well, let's just see what you're doing, go drive with them, see all the mistakes that they're making, and then give suggestions, and also be very clear that for each different driver, there's a multitude of different ways you can do it, and you just have to find what works for you. Where that way we're not like, well, e-braking isn't working for you because your e-brake sucks, you don't have a hydro or whatever. I'm a big disbeliever in hydros. I'm not big on hydros.
He doesn't drive cars that require hydros.
I've made my e-brakes all work in my cars.
Well, you have
and also
drum discs.
Well, they all have it now.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's but it just works differently because everyone has different styles, and so
snap e-brake things, just keep tightening it, and then he's like, no, you don't need a hydro. I'm like, no, man, like I don't have enough, like it doesn't lock. Yeah. Anyway.
I just don't like it when people just skip this step. They don't even try to make their car function correctly by doing basic maintenance and or seeing what the
I'm
problems.
drifting. I need a hydro.
I mean, it's as easy as like when we all started driving. It probably took us up until like I would say almost like 4 years. It probably took me to get to the level that I was comfortable drifting well enough where I'm like I can steer where my car is going. Whereas if you look at like the newest drift team, like Living Legends, they probably started like beginning of not even the beginning of last year, like a little bit before then, and then between that they're drifting like confidently. Yeah, I mean like
keeping in mind that the majority of that team are first year drivers.
Yeah, but they're driving. It took them no time to get to that level. You know what I mean? Like it was like it would probably take way back when where it was like, how did you link those 3 corners? Like what do I need to do that?
They have 100 years of experience to draw from all the people that have spent 10 years doing it.
Now it's like, send people out, follow this line, do this. And now you get people that within a year they can pick it up like super easy. And then maybe after like 2 or 3 they can be like almost as good as it took Husky like 5 years to do, right?
Yeah. Progression is crazy like that.
While also being incredibly ignorant and determined to keep going and have that drive because you want to have fun with your friends. Yeah. And that's where the difference of why some teams just stop is just because people move on, and once one moves on, it's sort of like, let's try something else. And, I mean, it's not a big deal at the end of the day, but it does change the atmosphere. I mean, it was definitely different a few years ago as opposed to where it is now, where those who are left are more in a teaching or motherly role or parental role. And then we have a lot of new kids, and it's nice to see it, not to see the sport die, but it's also disheartening when your friends are off doing other stuff. But I mean, if you do the same thing every year, it's it becomes kind of boring and stuff.
You're not going to do the same thing every single weekend of your life.
But it's just how much seat time you have too, right? So you just have so much. You're just like, I don't want to do drifting anymore.
So that I don't know. 2010, 2012, that time period is when island style started being a huge thing, and I think 2012 was our first pumpkin smash. DUI started happening a couple years, and they were like, everyone was like, we should do a DUI at Western Speedway, and
AKA a 2-day event.
Yeah, AKA a 2-day event. But what people generally don't know is that like we get what is available. Like we get stat holidays because no one else picks them. I don't like I want a Saturday. Like those are taken by like the larger events at the racetrack. Yeah. And then the only time of the year that we can get 2 days then is around some kind of anything is October. And I end up working out like we used to have like our pumpkin event would be like a 1 day. We would go get like a truckload of pumpkins.
Explain what pumpkin smash is first of all.
Well, it started out we would have an event near the end of October, and then we're like, what would be funny is if we would start driving around and smashing pumpkins, and so we're like, okay, cool. And I think that maybe started 2010. All I remember is from the very beginning. Every year after that, I was like, we have to outdo last year, get even more pumpkins, like 2 truckloads. And the year after that,
10,000 truckloads.
As a quick segue or refresher is that previous to this, the few years predating Pumpkin Smash, we would just find random garbage on the track, and we would just run into it. So
there was like,
but it was every once in a while.
Strollers, there was weird.
There's a chandelier.
Because sometimes we would find garbage left at the racetrack, and the most famous one that I remember, probably no one else does, is the chandelier. I took the picture of that one, which I remember at the time being really dumb because I was like, okay, you guys are gonna go and keep driving hit that chandelier, and I would stand on the track to get the shot. And it wasn't until like the 3rd or 4th time that I think like Warren passed me. I'm like, I could stand on the wall out of the way.
You could be safe.
There's a lot of times where I've almost died at Western Speedway. I mean, it's okay because I guess I'm running it, so like I can
fine if you die.
Yeah, the insurance is my name. It's fine.
You know who I am?
Yeah, but you're not allowed to do it, but I can, kind of thing.
Do whatever I want.
Yeah, I can't yell at you, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd randomly smash stuff. I mean, that's always fun to like hit things. But I guess
well,
until you have to fix all the damage.
It's a clipping point that you can destroy. So it was just funny because you're smashing something with your car, and it was like I think I remember a picture of like a baby stroller or something.
Yeah, there was a stroller.
There's probably a stroller with pumpkins in it at some point.
Because what happens at Western Speedway is they have a swap and shop, so it's a giant flea market, and then sometimes it coincides. We'll have our event like the day after, or people just leave like their garbage from the swap and shop, and if it doesn't get cleaned up, we're like 6 and we'll have the trailer. Yeah, well, you guys want to hit it with your car? Like, why not? Anyway, so that segued into the pumpkin thing. We're like, hey, you want to be cool? Like, why don't we smash some pumpkins? So like, I don't know if it was the first year that we figured out that hitting hard pumpkins was bad.
Yeah, well, I think it was probably the first year because I think I came to the second one and it was like,
soft
don't hit
pumpkins
these
only.
things.
And then I remember, I don't know if it's the first or second year, but there's pictures of Matt Tregear, and then we didn't really talk a lot about Matt Tregear, but he's like, if there was like a Hall of Fame of drifters or like notable drifters from Western Speedway, he's like one of the best, or one of out of the old school guys, he's like the best driver from back when, and he was like the most committed guy, and he's like, I don't know, like the drifter from Western Speedway. If anybody knew him, it was Matt Tregear.
All around great guy.
Yep.
And but he wasn't driving, and then Matt Tregear, like me, is kind of, we like goofing around. So he was like, I'm like, yeah, you can throw the pumpkins at the cars, like roll them. But he was like not rolling them into the side of the car. He's like bowling them into the radiators. Like it became a thing where like, just like everything else that's ever happened at probably anything anywhere, everything, almost every rule that we have at Cap D or for Western Speedway
is a learned event.
Is a learned thing, you know, like
don't bowl a 30-pound pumpkin at a car.
We didn't have roll bars on convertibles until, because we were like, cars can never flip at Western Speedway, like that's impossible. Not a thing. And then there was like a BRZ when they were brand new during autocross. Yeah. Flipped in the back straight because he just drove up like the bank and then I guess cut it too sharp.
This is in the hairpin.
Yeah, in the hairpin.
At first skier speeds of.
And he drove up the bank. It's like a dirt bank, so it was like a hairpin and it was kind of like a dirt bank
into
on one
side.
Or blackberry and then he kind of drove up it, and I guess he cut the wheel really sharp, so then his car rolled down the hill, and then we're like, oh, fuck, cars can flip. Like if you're at a convertible, like you're fucking dead. So we're like, oh, okay, next year. Like, if you bring a convertible, you need a roll bar. A lot of people didn't like that, especially if they had convertibles. Some people just said, you know, screw it, we'll just do it.
But in a Miata, you can get a used hard dog or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, it's not as cheap or plenty
anyway,
as it used to be.
No.
Getting to the point of why we have rules now, it's like, whoever's doing pumpkins, you have to be like, you can't roll it in the cars. Like, if you don't want your car, like... It became a thing. Like, if you come to Pumpkin Smash,
realize these will wreck your car.
You're going to drive into pumpkins, and like, I have like... The biggest damage I have on my car is usually from either me doing demos, which is like we do demonstrations for like the big circle track events. We'll do like drift demos, which are like, you could talk about those. Those are the hardest thing you could ever do because they only give us the oval, and then usually I'll go because I can't find anyone else to go, and I've got like a shitty NARX7, so I'm basically like limiter the entire time, and you have to it's a gong show, and then you always fuck up your car, but then when you hit a hard pumpkin, like I have like all these huge round dents in like rockers and quarter panels and shit from hitting big pumpkins. So they do a lot more damage than you would think. So we have to like, you know...
Who would think that hitting a solid object...
Bowling them across the track was awesome.
They probably weigh as much as a bowling ball, to be honst. So
it's like
he was like, I remember him rolling them into like fiberglass bumpers, and the fiberglass bumper would shatter, and they were like radiators, and you're like, oh my god. Oops. So that's like, okay, obviously don't do that. Years afterwards, we're trying to find soft pumpkins, so that's what we basically try to get, is like, okay, only get the soft ones. Now we learn like, if you hit a pumpkin, it'll fuck up your car. It doesn't matter if it's soft or not.
Well, keeping in mind too that the more and more pumpkin squash bits on the track makes it super slippery.
So now
it becomes ice.
Now you just place them around the perimeter of corners. So if you want to get out there, you can get
last
to them.
Last year they were sweeping it off, so it made it last a lot longer, which was nice.
Yeah.
And then we got a sponsor, which was Superstore.
Yeah.
It was really hard because last year was the driest winter we've ever had on the island, which is rare because usually it like rains like if you were in England or something. So I guess pumpkins only get soft or rotten if it rains, and if it's a dry winter, then they're all good. Hard, so like we're cold calling all the farms we've ever gone to try and get like these rotten pumpkins that we usually get for like free, and they're like, no, like we actually don't have any.
Everything is rocks.
But the pro of that was when we went to go to like grocery stores to try and get rotten pumpkins, like Superstore was like, we have so many pumpkins because I guess I don't know who
Overstocked.
they're just overstocked because none of them are bad and none of them are going bad.
And
So they were like, you show up with a truck and we will put a pallet of pumpkins in it. And then I think we had like 4 or 5 pallets of pumpkins that we just went through that entire weekend. But that's the point it got to of like 1-day events, and there was at least 2 or 3 of those, to 2-day events of just pumpkin smashing mayhem. It's probably the funnest events because there's no... I mean, the most work that we'll do is at like a proper competition event, and there's so much work involved of organizing all the things. And at the end result is not a lot anyway. Like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's just a competition, but like there's we don't even have a lot of people in the grandstands. Maybe like 50 to 150 at the most ever, which we don't really see that much anymore.
It's for the drivers.
It's for the drivers.
It's drifting for the drivers, which is island style.
But it's
in a nutshell.
It's like the most relaxing event, and it's almost a vacation for all the staff and volunteers because it's such a mellow event. There's like you just drive all day. There's no organization. There's just you drive, you smash pumpkins, you clean the pumpkins up, and everything is a hoot. There's like videos you can go watch. It's even fun to clean up the pumpkins. Like the truck got so overloaded with how many pallets of pumpkins that the hitch was on the ground.
Yeah.
When I was like driving, I'm like, what's that noise? Like, and I'm just dragging the hitch across the parking lot. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, it's pretty gross cleaning up 1,000 shattered pumpkins.
We buy gloves. I don't know.
But there's like 500 people doing it, so it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Well, it's mostly just picking up on the...
We're lucky that none of them are rotten, because when they're rotten, you're gagging a little.
Yeah.
But
that just shows the community as well. It's like
if
everybody pitches in for like 5 minutes, we can get this whole thing cleaned up.
And it happens. It's literally like 5 to 10 minutes, and
like you said earlier, everything that you do is a learned event. So now you clean up the pumpkins at 2:00 on Sunday, not at 5:30 on Sunday when everyone's
already gone. Yeah,
it's like, shut her down, we're cleaning up.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, we started doing those, and those have been... We're getting a lot of drivers that come out from a lot of places. It's basically become like a mini DUI. We don't get a lot of external drivers that we...
No, but there's so many
DUI is like seems to be like a huge
it's Western, so it's all Saskatchewan.
Yeah, you get a lot of that. And then we're starting to get some guys from the States that come up to Pumpkin Smash. Get a lot more people from Alberta that come out for it, but... Yeah. It's such a big event. I turn people away. Like it's like we hit capacity.
It almost always sells out really fast.
Well, keeping in mind too that the island has zero exposure in terms of photographers and media people from abroad. So a lot of people will go to a DUI. So that's like when Animal Style went, and like it has the exposure through those external sources to make it that event. Yeah. Ours is big based off of strictly local stuff, and the occasional, like most things on the island, it's word of mouth, and then everyone just knows somebody. So then that's how ours has come to be. I couldn't even imagine how it would be like a DUI situation. I mean, DUI's changed a lot as well due to the change in clientele as well. So like the island, who used to go 50 to 60 strong in terms of drivers, is now down to maybe 15, 20 tops, and it's not even the same drivers that it was 5-10 years ago. So it's a huge change, and like that's the other thing of Island Style is the fact that we have zero media coverage. Like we don't exist to the rest
there's local media because there's lots of pictures on Facebook, but no one in LA.
There's
is
no like
posting
super
Instagram
famous guy who's come out to our event and like this was sick.
Like, who gives a shit about this little island over here that's doing all these things?
Well, I mean, like none of the cars,
zero credibility through anywhere.
None of the cars are flashy or like crazy looking enough, or the builds aren't to the level that would merit probably some crazy guy to come over and be like, this guy's the best ever. I mean, and that's not what Island Style is about. We don't really care. So at the end of the day, like
it makes the island what it is, but also it would be nice to be recognized on a more global scale when you're actually having conversations with pseudo drifters who, in my opinion, are outside of posing, just like those guys who do an ollie and they're like,
it's very. I mean, when it wasn't until I started going to other. I mean, I'm like, people don't know. I'm not a huge drift fan. I kind of just took over Cap D because it was like, okay, well, I'm in charge now, and
guess no one else is doing this.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wasn't even in the position of power. It was like no one else is doing it, and I have an idea of to do it better, and then that's fell into this is my life now. Like some people don't even, like, do you want to do this if I'm gone? They're like, nope. And you're like, is there any money involved? Like, nope.
There's a lot of people.
Well, there's
who
money
think-
up front, but yeah, other than
Yeah,
that,
you can
just
keep all the
pay
money, but like it's gonna die pretty quick.
Just a bunch of grumpy people.
Yeah.
We won't go into some of the sordid history through.
Oh, there's lots of history.
Island style. We're cutting it off.
Cutting it off.
Yep, that's it.
I don't
That's
have
it
to
for
come back
island
to it,
style.
right?
That's it for island style.
Oh, there's yeah.
Any last minutes for island style?
Keep drifting fun. That's what we're all about.
Done.